Okay, in this video, we're going to review the security settings available in Axis LMS. So, I'm gonna click on the System tab, and from here, I'm gonna click on the Site Design tile, and then, click on the Learning Portal tile. And there are two areas here that we're going to review. The security settings is going to be first. So, let's click on the Security Settings tile, and let's go over these options. So the first thing is the password expiration setting, and this lets you set up how long a user's password is good for until they have to reset it. You can certainly turn this off if you don't want them to have to reset their password, or you can set how long the password is good for. The next option is to limit the failed login attempts inside of an hour. You can limit how many times the user can attempt to log in unsuccessfully before they are locked out. So what happens here is, if they exceed the number of attempts set here, their account will be deactivated, and a notification email will be sent to the administrator, at which point, the administrator can determine if they want to unlock the user or not. The next item is two-factor authentication. And when this is turned on, it basically is a tracking mechanism for the combination of the user's IP address and web browser. So essentially what happens is, when a user signs in, if the system doesn't recognize the combination of their IP address and web browser, it will prompt them to enter a verification code, which gets either emailed or text messaged to them, so they can verify that they are in fact who they say they are, and this can be turned on or off. The two-factor device limit is related to the two-factor authentication. If two-factor authentication is turned on, what you set here will determine how many web browser plus IP address combinations can be used by the user before they are prevented from accessing their account. If this happens, if they exceed the limit, you can go in and do a reset from the user dashboard for that particular user. You could do a reset on their devices so they'll be able to go ahead and go back into their training and begin or continue accessing their account. The user password recovery field. This sets what a user can use to recover their password. You can either set this to username or username and email address. You just want to keep in mind, if you have multiple users with the same email address, you want to set this to just username. So the final item is the Learning Portal website. IP address whitelist. Here's where you can set up specific IP addresses that can be used to access the training site. So, if you have users in a particular campus, a particular building, etc., and you only want them to be able to access their training while they're inside those locations, then you would use this setting here to whitelist those IP addresses. Alright. Going back to the Learning Portal website, and we're going to click on the User Session Settings tile here. This gives us some additional security functionality. The first thing we have here is inactive session detection. If this is enabled, the system will prompt the user to prove they are still active after a period of inactivity. So, users are considered to be active when navigating between pages within the Learning Portal and inside their courses. What will happen is, if you set this up, for example, let's set it up for 5 minutes. Now, every 5 minutes, if there has been no activity by the user, a pop-up will appear on the user's training session, basically saying, "Hey, are you still here? Are you still active?" And then, they will have 60 seconds to say, "Yes, I'm still here." If they don't do that, they will be signed out. So, an example of this would be, someone goes in to take their training, they step away from their computer. 5 minutes later, in this example, they're not in front of their computer. So, the system will detect that they're not there, and it will log them out. So, that's how that works. And the next item on here is the user session limits. If you want to deter users from sharing their login credentials with others, you can limit them to a single active session at a time. Let me give you an example of this. Let's say I go into my training on my phone, but I'm already in there on my computer. I'm gonna get a prompt that basically says, "You already have a session established under this username. Do you want to log out, or do you want to disconnect the pre-existing session that's already ongoing for this account?" So you can set this up to allow or not allow multiple user sessions. You can set it up to apply to all users, or you could apply that to a specific user group. So for example, perhaps you have users that you suspect that are handing their passwords out to other people. You might drop them into a user group, apply this setting for limiting a user to a single session to just people in that user group, and therefore everyone else can still continue as normal. That concludes the security settings overview. I hope you found it helpful.